Yeah, what's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Prison Break Raw. I'm your host, the one and only Big JD. We all have dreams growing up, and some of us hold on to dreams even when we're adults. I picture what my life is going to look like 5 years from today. It seems that as time progresses, more and more goals seem to be achieved with my effort, with my drive, with my will. When we're young, we have a lot more dreams, some of them very unrealistic. Nonetheless, we all have them. Some people achieve those dreams. You have the kid that wants to become president when he grows up. How many of presidents in the past had wanted that as their goal since they were young, since they were kids? We know of a couple of them just by reading their autobiographies. But the dreamer, to live, to prosper, to have a family, to have all those things, young Juan Rayford Jr. was no different than any other kid in America or in the world. His big goal was to play football. At least in college, hopefully he can go into the NFL. That's all he wanted to do with his life. He wasn't a gang member. He wasn't involved in all the bullshit. As a matter of fact, his family had moved him out of the greater Los Angeles area out into the Antelope Valley, the city of Lancaster, in the hopes of getting away from all the gang violence, the nonsense, the drama that's down in the greater LA area or out towards South Central and those areas and such. But Lancaster is not exempt from gang violence, as we all know. Any of us that's from California knows that there's plenty of gang activity going on in the city of Lancaster as well. So at the age of 17, Juan Rayford Jr. was at a party. Now remember, he was almost going to be done with school. He was possibly looking to go to college on a scholarship. He was looking to get his grades up even higher to further increase those chances. He goes to a party. He dips into the back to play some video games. He hears a commotion, and just like everybody else at a party, just like you have, I have, all of us have done when we're at these house parties, wants to see what the fuck's going on. So he goes out there to see his buddy and another guy who he knew that they were feuding over some time, fighting. Next thing you know, shots ring out. 11 people are in the kill zone of what it's called, and we'll talk about that further as we go. And then the cops were called. The detectives had honed in on Juan Rayford Jr. for whatever reason. It was just his lucky day, I guess. Somebody had to go down because nobody was talking and nobody even knows who did the shooting. Nobody was killed. Nobody was hurt. Shots were fired. Nobody even knows how the shots were fired. You don't know if it was in the air, if it was at the ground, if it was even a real firearm. I don't even think ballistics were done, nor were there any bullets retrieved. I don't remember reading that in this piece that I had got sent to me. So Juan Rayford Jr. and his buddy were charged with 11 counts of attempted homicide. They were booked in the LA County Jail, and the prosecutor, who was an overzealous one at that, imposed an $11 million bail. Now that's more than any diaper sniper, seat-sniffing, tree-jumping rapist, anything like that. That's more than organized crime figures, all that shit. $11 million. $1 million for each person that was in what was called the kill zone. Not to mention this is based off of an old law that I'm very familiar with called the 10 to 20 life law, dealing with gangs and gun enhancements. As you know, California don't like gang members. California has never liked gang members. And some can argue it's for good cause, it's for good reason, good justification, considering the 90s were full of drive-by shootings, gang-related shootings, all that shit. to the point to where they started to impose tougher laws. Street terrorism, 186.22, 10 to 20 life laws, all the rest of them. They were going hard in the paint in the prison systems to lock people up into shoes to break their spirit so that they could debrief, drop out, and go to the S&Y yard, of which that didn't solve the gang problem because they went over there and started more gangs. Because they never really wanted to change in the first fucking place. That's the point I argue. But yes, tougher gang laws because of gang violence. Yet in this day and age, the state of California is trying to lighten sentences of pedophiles and such. But they want to keep tougher gang laws. Whatever. I have my thoughts and opinions on that, but I know that these laws, the kill zone, all of that shit. Now, the kill zone, which is a theory of when somebody does a shooting, that if you're in a certain radius, if I'm shooting at you, you're within the kill zone. They could give me a life sentence for that. Falls within the 10 to 20 life law, all the enhancements and everything like that. Double up, stacked up even higher. And depending on the amount of victims, you can't get away with, well, it's just a couple of victims and, all that. It doubles and it doubles on top of every single victim, every person. If there was 100 people in there, you would get about 10,000 years in prison for that enhancement right there. Now, normally, I would look at a case like this as being, well, this is the price we pay for gang violence. Jails, institutions, or death is not only reserved for Alcoholics Anonymous, it's also reserved for gang violence and the addiction to crime. Normally, I would look at something like this as being like, well, you should have taken the deal, man. I've told people that in county before. When they decided they thought they had an airtight case, they knew they can beat it, going up in front of a jury, and they lose. Next thing you know, they're coming to me crying about how do they get out of 125 years. I don't know the answer to that question. The difference between Juan Rayford Jr. and some of these other people that I've come across, and it hasn't been that often. As a matter of fact, I've never seen anybody fight a case like this unless, of course, they were really innocent. And in the case of Juan Rayford Jr., he was innocent. The reason I tell you he's innocent, not because I was there, not because I could read minds, but just because I've been justice involved for so many years. And I've listened to all the stories. I've seen all the people. I know how to call bullshit. I know how to read bullshit on the face of somebody who's trying to feed me their story as if I'm the DA or the jury. Originally, they offered him 15 years. Okay, now think about 15 years. He's already been inside for 15 years. He would have been out already a couple of years back. He'd have already been out. He'd probably already be off parole right now. And he's 32 years old right now. So, he decided that he wasn't going to take that deal because he was innocent. Now, here's where I try to stress the importance of getting a private paid attorney. But, of course, there wasn't any GoFundMes or anything like that back 15 years ago of what I don't believe. I don't remember hearing about it. So it would have made it quite difficult for him to raise funds in order to get an attorney. His parents had practically no money, very poor African-American family in Los Angeles. Remember what I said about you get what you pay for. Well, they didn't pay for anything, and they got stuck with the public pretender, the dump truck, as we like to call him. This overworked dump truck did nothing to defend their client. Nothing. They didn't call any witnesses on his behalf, anything like that. This kid was basically doomed from the start. I can guarantee you that if I was to ask him right now, do you wish you would have taken the deal? He probably would have said, yes, I should have just taken the deal because it's not what it is, it's what it looks like. Being African American in a party where there's probably gang members, you're already getting profiled because this is what happens in gang environments. You get profiled. I've been profiled. We all get profiled in these environments. Well, somebody could say, well, none of them were gang members. Well, how do you know that? All right? If somebody was taking shots at a party, somebody was involved in the streets in some way, shape, or form. It may not have been Juan Rayford Jr., but it was somebody. So you always fall victim to your environment in these cases like that. And then when you have the public defender, you're even more doomed. But I believe this kid was innocent because he decided to fight this case. I've seen many of them look at it and it's like, no, I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to take the deal because they know they're guilty. They know they were involved in some shit. And they're going to chalk off their losses, just, chalk it off as the risk you play when you run in the streets, and they're going to go off to prison. But this kid wasn't one of those kinds. So he took it to the box. And originally the mother and the daughter who owned the home had said that he didn't do any of the shooting. Next thing you know, they recant their stories. They change their stories around. You have to ask why. Why would they change their stories? And should that not have been thrown out in court? Well, it should have been. That was a trial issue, of course. The defense could have argued that they changed their stories. The witness has been compromised, tampered with, whatnot. What did the DA have on this mother and daughter that brought them to selling out this innocent young man? Were they paid? What was the motivation for them to change their story all of a sudden? The most crucial time to interview somebody in the aftermath of a crime is within the first 24 to 48 hours. But this is months later when they change their story. The jury came back with a guilty verdict, and Juan Rayford Jr. was given 220 years in the California Department of Corrections and Rehumiliation. 220 years. His dreams of playing football are gone. They're definitely gone now because he's already been in there for 15 years. He's 32 years old. Nobody will ever sign him. Imagine watching your dreams get crushed simply because you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, this 10 to 20 life law works like this. If I show you a gun in the commission of a crime, I get 10 years. If I discharge it, I get 20. If somebody gets hit, I get life. So Juan Rayford Jr. didn't get life, but he got 220 years. That might as well be life. 85% of that, it's not even realistic. Since the passing of these tougher laws on gang members in California, there's been over 100 million years, or 100,000 years, 100,000 years of time given to people behind these enhancements. These very unconstitutional enhancements at that. They've done nothing to solve crime. They've done nothing to combat gangs. The California government, in all of its hating of Trump and being the open arms people that they say they are, talking about being progressive and socialist and all that, have no problem with sending poor people of color to prison for hundreds of thousands of years. And then yet people wonder why I don't take their side on anything. This is just another example. And the fact that he continues to maintain his innocence causes me to believe that he is innocent. So what has he done since? He's been fighting this thing tooth and claw ever since. has gotten nowhere. He reaches out to Eric Holder, you know, the big advocate for criminal justice reform, the guy that wants to shut the prison systems down and help people of color that are disproportionately disenfranchised and affected by the out-of-control justice system we have in this country, did nothing to help him. Because it's not political. Because he can't politicize it in any way, shape, or form. But in the defense of the former U.S. Attorney General, there's really nothing he can do. Even Donald Trump, if he was to pardon this kid, his pardon would hold no weight because it's not a federal crime. It's a state-level crime. The one that needs to step in and show that he is really a champion of the poor, really a champion of people of color, is Gavin Newsom. Why him and that Wiener guy is so busy helping pedophiles and diaper snipers and seat sniffers and all the likes. They should table all that for just 1 minute and let this young man go free. Because there's no evidence against him at all. It's a changed statement. That's it. That's all they used. And Javier Becerra, the Attorney General, another one that talks about sanctuary cities and all that and fuck Trump and all this shit like that. Where's he at? He could easily end this whole nightmare for Juan Rayford Jr. He could easily end it. But he chooses not to. Him and Newsom could end it right now. Full pardon. Clemency. Commute the sentence. There's no political gain for it, so they won't do it. Instead, all Becerra has said is, it's going to the Supreme Court, I have no comment. Or it's going to the Court of Appeals in California, Ninth Circuit, whatnot. No comment. But I guarantee you, if this was some kind of case that had to do with a police shooting or something like that, he'd be all over. He'd be stuck to it like a Band-Aid. Now, I'm not going to try to politicize this any more than the next person. But the one thing that I can tell you about this whole thing is it stinks. Unfortunately, Juan Rayford Jr. is not unique. This has happened many, many times. This has happened to some of my peeps, some of my homies. It almost happened to me once. But the main thing is what do you do with your dreams when they're just crushed in front of your face? How do you move forward from that? I never had dreams of going to prison, being abused, sexually abused, mentally, physically, and emotionally abused. I never planned on doing all the things that I did to further my self-destruction. When I was a kid, I wanted to go to West Point. I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be a fireman, just like any other normal kid wants to do these things. My dreams were crushed by a lot of bad decisions that I made that put me in horrible situations. Juan Rayford Jr. put himself in a bad situation, yes, by going to that party, but what is he supposed to do? Lock himself in the house until he goes to college? He's a kid. Kids make bad decisions, but yet the world likes to punish him like adults, and that's what they did. They punished him as an adult. Jerry Brown Jr. did nothing either to help this. Where's Kim Kardashian in all this? Has anybody even reached out to her about it? Somebody really should. While she's busy trying to get a rapist murderer off of death row in another state, she should be trying to get this kid who's been framed out of prison in her own state. That's just my thoughts on it. But you see, this is where I agree with some people when they talk about inequality in the justice system if you're a person of color. Not that it's because you're a person of color. That right there I don't agree with, because I know a lot of poor whites that get railroaded as well. But it's the fact that more than whites, people of color are at the disadvantage when it comes to the justice system, because most of them cannot afford a private attorney. It even says in this article that I'm sharing with you that you can go ahead and read it yourself. It'll be in the description and in the comments section. They even said an overworked public defender. If he would have had a private attorney, he probably never would have did any time. He probably would have walked. So, at some point in time, there needs to be a push towards reforming the legal system at the court level with these public defenders. Because the DA's office has a lot more of an advantage than the public defender does. It's just one public defender against the whole DA's office. Normally, when you go in front of a judge, the prosecution has like 3 or 4 people over there against one public defender. Somebody needs to even the odds out. This is an unfortunate, drastic turn of events for a young man whose life is basically ruined. Even if he was to get out tomorrow, what would he do for his future? Where would he go from here? Hopefully, if it turns out that they find out that he was wrongfully accused, that he becomes a millionaire. But the post-traumatic stress in the prison system is never going to go away. I know this all too well. You already know what it is. And you heard it right here. Prison Break Raw, uncut, uncensored, no holds barred, not sugarcoat, not politically correct, all up in your face, slapping you with that dick of reality. And I'm out.